When the alien woman opened his suit, what she saw shocked her to the core. Ethan had never felt fear like this before. The air inside his ship was thick, the engines sputtering and dying with every passing second. He could hear the ship's systems failing around him, the alarms blaring in sharp, desperate bursts. Outside the cracked windows, all he could see was a barren wasteland of dust and rock. His destination had been a planet far from Earth, a place to explore, to map. But now, with the ship spiraling out of control, all he could do was brace for impact. When the ship finally hit the surface, it wasn't a crash. It was a violent, brutal stop. The shockwave threw him forward, his seatbelt cutting into his chest as everything around him went black. The next thing he knew, he was awake. He blinked several times, confused, disoriented. His head throbbed. But the pain was nothing compared to the panic that gripped him as he saw the cockpit's shattered glass. His heart raced as he looked around. The planet outside, its surface untouched by life, lay stretched out like a desolate painting. His stomach twisted in fear. He was alone, completely alone. Ethan struggled to free himself from the seat, his legs numb and uncooperative as he crawled toward the hatch. With a few desperate tugs, the hatch creaked open, revealing the alien landscape outside. The ground was rough and cracked, the sky a pale orange hue with distant mountains stretching like jagged teeth. There was no sign of life, just a haunting silence. He tried to steady his breath. His communication system was fried, his navigation completely out of order. It was a miracle he had even survived the crash, but now he was stranded. Alone. Or so he thought. As he staggered out of the ship, feeling the gritty dust beneath his boots, Ethan noticed something or someone moving in the distance. At first he thought it was a mirage, but the figure grew clearer as he approached. A tall, striking woman stood before him, her silhouette almost too perfect against the backdrop of the orange sky. She was clothed in a dark suit that shimmered like liquid metal, her features sharp and angular yet mesmerizing. Her skin was a deep shade of blue, and her eyes unlike any he had ever seen, pierced through him, glowing faintly in the dim light. Ethan's heart raced again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was something else. Curiosity, awe. The woman seemed almost unreal, like something out of a dream. But what struck him the most was how still she was. She didn't move, didn't speak. For a moment they just stood there, sizing each other up, both unsure of what to do next. Ethan wanted to speak, but the words caught in his throat. How could he possibly communicate with someone so alien, so different? The woman took a step forward, her movements fluid and graceful, and he instinctively took a step back, unsure of her intentions. His body tensed, ready for whatever might happen next. Then, to his surprise, the woman reached for him. Slowly, as if sensing his hesitation, her hand extended toward him, but there was no sign of aggression. Her fingers, long and delicate, hovered just inches from his chest. Ethan's mind raced. Was she going to kill him? Was this a trap? The thought flashed through his mind, but it didn't make sense. She wasn't attacking. Instead, her eyes softened, studying him with an intensity that almost felt familiar. Her hand hovered for a few more seconds before she spoke. Her voice was deep yet melodious, almost like a song, but the words made no sense. They were foreign, alien. Ethan stared at her, trying to comprehend what she had said, but it was clear that the language was completely unintelligible to him. His mind spun with a million questions. Who was she? Why was she here? And most importantly, what did she want from him? Before he could even begin to process the situation, the woman's eyes narrowed slightly, as though noticing something about him. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze falling to the suit he wore. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. She seemed to be scrutinizing him, her alien features calculating, analyzing. There was no fear in her eyes, only curiosity. Without warning, she reached out and touched the side of his suit. The touch was light, almost gentle, but it sent a jolt of electricity through his body. Ethan stiffened, his breath catching in his throat. What was happening? The suit he wore, his only protection against the harsh elements of the alien world, suddenly malfunctioned. He felt the pressure around his body release in an instant, the suit's systems beginning to fail. His heart raced and his vision blurred as he struggled to maintain his footing. And then, just as quickly, everything stopped. The suit completely failed. His body was now exposed to the alien environment, but what shocked Ethan wasn't the lack of protection. It was the woman's reaction. Her eyes widened in a mixture of shock and awe. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. She simply stared at him, her gaze fixed on him like he was something she had never seen before. Ethan's pulse quickened as he realized that whatever was happening, it was far bigger than anything he could have imagined. What had she seen? What did she know about him? The silence between them grew heavier. The strange woman stood motionless, and Ethan felt an unsettling chill creep down his spine. Something was happening, something he didn't understand. And in that moment,
he knew his life would never be the same.
Again, what had begun as a simple crash landing had turned into something far more dangerous and far more mysterious than he could have ever imagined. But why was she here? And why was he so certain that this encounter, this moment, would change everything? As the woman's glowing eyes never left his, Ethan could only wait for the next move. What was she going to do? And what did it mean for him and his survival on this desolate alien world? The uncertainty hung in the air, thick and suffocating. As Ethan took his first tentative step into a new and terrifying reality, Ethan stood frozen, his breath shallow as Zara's gaze remained fixed on him. Her eyes were unblinking, studying him like a scientist examining an alien artifact. The air around them felt thick, heavy with anticipation. There was a silence between them that stretched far beyond mere words. Something unspoken hung in the balance. Zara's fingers twitched as if she were contemplating the next move. And then, slowly, she reached toward him. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine, but he couldn't move. Every instinct screamed at him to step back, to protect himself, but his legs refused to obey. Her fingers brushed the edge of his suit, and at the contact, a wave of energy surged through Ethan's body. It wasn't painful, far from it, but the sensation was so foreign, so unfamiliar that his mind couldn't process it. It was as though the very fabric of his being was vibrating, resonating with something deep within him that he didn't understand. Zara's touch lingered for a moment longer, and Ethan's chest tightened. His breathing became ragged, and he instinctively reached up to remove his helmet, desperate to feel the cool, fresh air on his face. The moment the helmet came off, he felt an immediate sense of relief, as if the weight of the world had been lifted. But when his eyes met Zara's again, her expression had shifted. Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time a flicker of emotion crossed her face. Was it confusion? Fascination? Ethan couldn't tell. She spoke again, but the language was still foreign to him. The words flowed like a melody, the syllables unfamiliar and strange. He could hear the softness of her tone, but the meaning was lost on him. Ethan shook his head, his own voice hoarse as he tried to respond. I don't understand you. His words felt so small in the vastness of the alien world surrounding them. Zara didn't seem frustrated or angry, just thoughtful. Her eyes darted to the suit he wore and then back to his face. Slowly, she lifted her hand, and with a gesture that seemed oddly delicate, she traced a finger along the fabric of his chest. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Ethan could feel the heat of her finger against his skin, and his body reacted involuntarily. It was like nothing he had ever felt before, a connection that transcended the physical. Her touch wasn't just a touch, it was a message. The suit buzzed beneath her hand, and a soft hum filled the air, almost as if it were alive. Ethan's eyes widened. What was she doing? What was happening to the suit? Zara pulled her hand away just as quickly as she had touched him. Her eyes flickered with something, alarm perhaps, but her face remained unreadable. Ethan's body still tingled with the aftershock of her touch, and he felt his heartbeat racing, his mind spinning in 1,000 different directions. She didn't speak, but the look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. Whatever she had done, it was no accident. This wasn't just a casual touch. It was as if she had unlocked something hidden, something within him that had been dormant until now. Ethan stumbled back a few steps, his mind reeling with questions. He wanted to ask her what she had done, to demand answers, but the words stuck in his throat. What could he say? What could he possibly ask when he didn't even know who or what she was? Zara stepped closer, her movements precise and graceful. She didn't seem to care that Ethan was still recovering from the shock. Her eyes narrowed as she studied him, her gaze now searching for something deeper, something buried. The air around them seemed to thicken with tension. Ethan felt a knot tighten in his chest. There was something more to this encounter, something that he couldn't quite put his finger on. His mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of his fractured thoughts. He had been on this alien planet for mere hours, yet it already felt like a lifetime. She reached for him again, but this time Ethan stepped back instinctively, raising his hands in a defensive gesture. "I don't know what's happening," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara stopped in her tracks, her eyes softening for a brief moment. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she raised her hand and pointed to the sky. The gesture seemed to convey something. Was it an invitation? A warning? Ethan couldn't be sure. He followed her gaze upward, where the sky above was a swirling mix of orange and purple clouds, the atmosphere thick with an unnatural glow. There was no sun, no stars, just a strange, endless twilight that seemed to stretch on forever. Ethan turned back to Zara, his mind whirling with confusion. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice laced with desperation. Zara's eyes didn't leave him as she stepped closer once again. Her gaze was almost piercing, as if she was trying to read something within him that even he couldn't comprehend. She said something, her words flowing like water, but the language was still beyond him. It was then that Ethan realized she wasn't just a stranger. She wasn't just some alien. She was looking for something. Something within him, something she needed. The question was, what was it? A faint hum filled the air again, and this time Ethan noticed that it was coming from her. The very air around her seemed to shift, vibrating with an energy he couldn't explain. It was as though the world itself had become alive, reacting to her presence. Ethan felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of his control, and yet he felt powerless to stop it. What was Zara? What had she done to him? His mind raced with the possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. And as Zara moved closer, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter, this touch, was only the beginning of something far greater than he could ever imagine. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, and all he could do was watch as the alien woman, with her glowing eyes and enigmatic presence, took another step toward him. And then, just before everything went dark, he felt the unmistakable pull of something, an ancient force, something older than the stars themselves, draw him into her orbit. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears as Zara's presence seemed to fill the entire landscape. The air around her shimmered with an almost tangible force. Each movement she made seemed to shift the very atmosphere, making everything feel as though it was about to unravel. His thoughts were a mess, a swirl of questions and doubts, and the more he looked at her, the more the confusion deepened. He tried to step back again, but his legs felt like they were made of stone. It was as if something invisible was holding him in place, keeping him from escaping. His breath hitched in his throat. This wasn't just fear. It was something far more primal, something he couldn't quite understand. Zara moved closer, her gaze unblinking, and Ethan's heart raced faster. He had to find some way to break free of this strange hold she had over him. "What do you want from me?" he asked again, his voice trembling despite himself. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for his chest once more, this time with both hands. The energy in the air intensified, and Ethan's heart skipped a beat. What was she doing? He felt a sudden pressure against his ribcage, a strange force pushing against him, as though the very air was being drawn into her hands. He tried to breathe, but it felt like his lungs were being crushed. Zara's eyes flickered with something he couldn't place. Sympathy? Regret? She didn't let go, her fingers pressing into the fabric of his suit. For a moment, everything seemed to fade away. The orange sky, the dusty ground, the silence that had swallowed the entire planet. It was just him and Zara, locked in an eerie, suffocating moment. Then, in a movement that almost seemed to happen in slow motion, Zara pulled back her hands. The pressure released and Ethan gasped, his lungs burning for air. He staggered back, his vision swimming, but he managed to stay upright. Zara stepped back as well, and this time her gaze softened. It was a fleeting expression, but for the first time since their encounter began, Ethan saw something human in her, something vulnerable. She wasn't just an alien. She wasn't just a powerful being with unknown abilities. She was afraid? Before he could gather his thoughts, Zara extended her hand to him once again. But this time it wasn't to touch him. It was an invitation. Ethan hesitated, but something inside him urged him forward. He took her hand, his fingers trembling as they closed around hers. The moment their skin made contact, he felt a strange warmth flood through his body, like a current of electricity running through his veins. His body hummed in response, every cell alive with the sensation. But it wasn't painful. It was something else, something profound. Zara tugged gently, guiding him toward the ship's wreckage. Ethan followed, his mind racing, but his feet moving on their own accord. He felt like he was being pulled into a new world, one that defied all logic. As they approached the wreck, Ethan saw it again, the strange energy in the air. It was as if the very ground beneath them was reacting to their presence. The dust seemed to stir, swirling in patterns that made no sense. The ship's wreckage, once a symbol of his crash, now appeared strangely alive, almost as if it were waiting for something. Zara stopped just before the wreck, her eyes scanning the debris. Ethan couldn't help but stare at her, trying to make sense of everything that was happening. She was different. Her very being seemed to pulse with an ancient energy, something far beyond anything he had ever encountered. But what was she? "Who are you?" Ethan finally asked, his voice raw. Zara's lips curled into a faint smile, though it was laced with sadness. She didn't answer immediately, instead taking a long, careful look at the wreckage. "I am not like you," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 untold stories. "And neither are you." Ethan's brow furrowed. What did she mean by that? Was he different from other humans? Before he could press her further, Zara motioned for him to look at the wreck. "There is something inside, something that should not be here." Her words were cryptic, but there was a definite urgency in her tone. Ethan felt a strange compulsion to follow her instructions, to look at the wreckage with new eyes. As he stepped closer, the energy in the air seemed to intensify. He could feel the hum of it in his bones. Something was buried in the wreck, something that didn't belong to this planet, something that wasn't even human. He knelt down, pushing aside the twisted metal and shattered pieces of the ship. His hands trembled as he cleared the debris, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the wreckage. The compartment was unlike anything he had seen before. It was smooth, almost organic in appearance, with strange symbols etched into its surface. Zara knelt beside him, her fingers brushing against the compartment's surface. She ran her hand over the symbols, and for the briefest moment, Ethan thought he saw them glow. Her face was a mask of concentration, her brow furrowed in deep thought. "It is not just your ship that brought you here," she said quietly. "There is something inside it, something that has been waiting." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Something had been waiting, but what? What could be inside this compartment? He had to know. With trembling hands, he reached for the compartment's latch and pulled it open. What he found inside wasn't what he expected. It wasn't a piece of technology, a weapon, or even a message from Earth. It was a small, glowing orb. The light it emitted was soft, yet powerful, and as soon as Ethan touched it, the world around him seemed to shift. His vision blurred, and the air grew thick with energy. Suddenly, memories flooded his mind, memories that didn't belong to him. Flashbacks of places he had never seen, faces he had never known, and events that had never happened. But they were real. He felt them. He lived them. The orb pulsed in his hand, and for the first time, Ethan understood. The truth was staring him in the face, and it was far more terrifying than he could have ever imagined. He wasn't just a human lost on an alien planet. He was something else entirely, and Zara, the alien woman who had touched him, knew exactly what he was. The moment Ethan touched the orb, everything changed. The overwhelming flood of memories, strange and vivid, rushed through his mind like a tidal wave. Faces, places, and emotions that weren't his but felt so real swirled together, leaving him breathless and disoriented. The orb pulsed in his hand, its glow brighter now, responding to his touch as if it recognized him. He stumbled back, dropping the orb in shock, and it rolled a few feet away. The moment it left his grasp, the flood of memories stopped, but the weight of them lingered. His chest tightened as if someone had squeezed the air from his lungs. He couldn't breathe properly. Was this real? Was he hallucinating? Or had something inside the orb unlocked a part of him he never knew existed? Ethan's eyes darted to Zara, who stood silently a few feet away. She didn't seem surprised by his reaction, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that was both comforting and unsettling. It was as if she already knew everything that had just happened, as though she had seen it all before. "Zara," his voice trembled, and he found himself unable to finish the question. How could he even ask her what he had just experienced? How could he even begin to process what was happening? Zara stepped forward, her expression unreadable. You felt it, didn't you? Her voice was soft, almost sympathetic. Ethan nodded slowly, his mind still reeling from the rush of memories and sensations. What was that? He asked, his voice a mixture of fear and confusion. Zara crouched down, her glowing eyes never leaving him. That, she said, pointing to the orb that now sat in the dust between them, is a piece of you. A piece of who you really are. You are not just a human, Ethan. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ethan shook his head, still trying to make sense of it. What do you mean? What's happening to me? Zara didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at the orb for a long moment, almost as though she were choosing her words carefully. You are not the person you think you are, she said finally, her tone calm but unwavering. And you haven't been for a long time. Ethan felt his heart race, the ground beneath him seeming to shift. His mind reeled, his thoughts scrambling to hold on to something solid. He couldn't understand what Zara was saying. He wasn't the person he thought he was? What did that even mean? Zara, please, he said, his voice cracking. Tell me what you mean. What's happening to me? Who am I? Zara stood and took a step closer to him, her movements deliberate and slow. You are not just a human explorer who crashed on this planet, Ethan. You were never meant to be just human. You are the result of something far greater. You are part of a legacy, one that stretches across galaxies, across time. And now that legacy is waking up. Ethan took a shaky step back, feeling the ground beneath him shift with every word she spoke. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. How could he, a simple human, be part of something so vast? Something that spanned galaxies? You've had this power inside you for as long as you can remember, Zara continued, her eyes fixed on his. The orb is what connects you to your true self, to the beings you once were, your true origins. He couldn't breathe. The memories he had glimpsed earlier were too much to comprehend. He had seen them. Images of places he had never been, people he had never met, but they felt so real. And now Zara was telling him that they were his memories, his past lives. What am I? Ethan whispered, the question slipping from his lips before he could stop it. Zara's gaze softened. You are an ancient being, Ethan. You were once part of a race that lived beyond the stars. A race whose technology and knowledge were unmatched. But something went wrong. You were lost, separated from your people, and you were reborn into a new life, a life as a human. But now the time has come for you to awaken. Ethan staggered back, his hands shaking as he tried to process the words. A part of him wanted to deny everything she was saying, to tell her she was wrong. But deep down he could feel it, the truth. The memories, the sensations, the knowledge that surged within him every time he touched the orb. It was undeniable. How? He choked out. How do I awaken? Zara reached out, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. You've already begun the process. The orb is a catalyst, a key to unlocking your past and your true potential. But you must learn to control it, to understand what you are. Ethan's mind swam with questions. If what Zara was saying was true, then everything he had known about himself, about his life, was a lie. He wasn't just a crash survivor stranded on a strange planet. He was something more, something ancient, powerful, and connected to a vast history beyond the reaches of his understanding. You are a part of a prophecy, Ethan, Zara continued. A prophecy that will change everything. Your awakening is not an accident. You were brought here for a reason. By who? Ethan asked, his voice low. Zara's eyes darkened, her expression shifting. By the ones who created you, she said quietly. The ones who have been watching you. They have been waiting for you to return. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. Who were these beings who had created him? Why had they left him on Earth only to awaken now? And what did this prophecy mean for him? Before he could ask another question, Zara took a step back, her expression hardening. They are coming, Ethan, she said, her voice a warning. The ones who made you. And they won't stop until they have you. You are their key to a power far greater than anything you can imagine. The ground beneath Ethan's feet seemed to tremble. He looked at Zara, his mind swirling with fear and confusion. Who were these beings? What did they want with him? As the air around them crackled with energy, Ethan realized that his journey had only just begun. The truth was far more complicated than he could have ever imagined, and now he was caught in the middle of something far larger than himself. Zara's eyes met his once more, and in that moment he saw something new, a sense of urgency, a knowledge that time was running out. The prophecy was unfolding, and Ethan had no choice but to play his part. The connection between them had been forged. Now there was no turning back. The air around Ethan seemed to buzz with an unseen force as Zara's words reverberated in his mind. He stood there, feeling as if the very ground beneath him was shifting, as though the planet itself was aligning with some ancient cosmic rhythm. The truth that had been slowly unfurling around him now seemed undeniable, but the magnitude of it was overwhelming. He wasn't just a lost human. He was the key to something much larger, something that stretched far beyond anything his mind could grasp. Zara's eyes, once filled with uncertainty and mystery, now held a sharper intensity. She stepped back, giving him space, but her presence still felt like a force he couldn't escape. Her every movement was deliberate, calculated. It was as if she had been preparing for this moment for longer than either of them realized. "You are not the only one," Zara spoke, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Her voice was steady, though there was an underlying urgency to it. "There are others. Those who, like you, were part of this race. Some are lost like you. Some are still out there, waiting." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine as he absorbed her words. "Others?" he repeated, his voice hoarse, struggling to make sense of it. "What are you talking about?" Zara turned toward the horizon, her gaze distant as though she could see something far beyond what was in front of them. "You were scattered, Ethan, your kind, the ones who share your blood. After the fall of your civilization, many were sent to distant worlds hidden away for their own protection. Earth was one of those worlds, a sanctuary but also a prison." Ethan's thoughts swirled. His mind was racing to understand the scope of what she was saying. He had always felt like an outsider, like there was something within him that didn't quite fit, but this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. He wasn't just human, he was part of an ancient race, a race that had been scattered across the stars, hidden away on different planets, just waiting for their awakening. "But why?" Ethan asked, his voice growing louder. "Why was I sent to Earth? Why was I hidden?" Zara's gaze softened as she turned back to him. "You were hidden to protect you. Your kind's power is immense, Ethan. It's more than just physical strength or advanced technology. It's a connection to something far greater, an energy that flows through the universe, binding all things together. If the wrong hands were to find you, it could mean the end of everything." Ethan swallowed hard, trying to process the enormity of Zara's words. He had always thought of himself as insignificant, just a man lost in space, stranded on a foreign planet. But now it seemed that he was anything but. He had been part of something far larger than he could have ever imagined. He was a vessel of unimaginable power, a link to an ancient energy that could reshape the fabric of existence itself. "So, what happens now?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and awe. "What do I do with all this? How do I control it?" Zara stepped forward, her eyes locking onto his. "You must learn to control it, Ethan. The power within you is awakening, but it is still unstable. You will have to train to understand the force that flows through you, and you will have to prepare for those who are coming." Ethan's heart raced. "Who's coming? You keep saying that, but I don't understand." Zara's expression hardened, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The ones who created you, the beings who scattered your kind across the universe. They are coming. They know you are awakening, and they will stop at nothing to find you. They are powerful, and they will use you to achieve their own ends. You are the key to unlocking the next phase of their plan. You must be ready to fight, Ethan. You must be ready to defend yourself and the others." Ethan's chest tightened as he took in the gravity of her words. He had thought he was just surviving, just trying to make sense of a world that had never made sense. But now he was the center of a cosmic battle, a battle that had been in motion long before he had ever set foot on this planet. "How do I fight them?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't even know what I am. How can I fight these beings when I don't understand the power inside me?"